Well, for tonight's lesson, we're not going to use PowerPoint because this is actually more of a Bible study than what it is a typical sermon, because there's so much Bible material that I want to go through. But we're going to start off at Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 through 37. Now, as you're turning there, I want you to think of times maybe that a close friend or a relative has asked you to do something, made you promise that they're going to tell you something and they don't want you to tell anybody or try to stop them or anything like that. And it kind of puts you in a bind because you want to be a friend, you want to be a good relative, and you want to support the individual, but then they tell you something that you know you can't keep that promise. We're going to talk about oath breaking tonight. And I believe that with what the Bible teaches, and we'll look at this one passage in a moment and then go to some other passages. Listen, if somebody asks you to do something and says, we swear to me you won't tell me, or promise you won't do anything about this, maybe the best thing to say is, as long as it is moral and ethical and legal, then yeah, I can make that promise. One time had a guy in a counseling session, so you don't know him, and it was far away from here, so you don't know about it, but he was having some family problems and some illness problems, and he came to my office and we were talking about it, and he says, well, one thing I know, I can straighten out the situation, and he pulls a 9mm bullet out of his pocket and holds it up. Now, I don't know whether he's talking about himself or about his wife, but I tell him, I hope you don't mean what I think you're meaning. Because if I have a hint that you're just not bloviating, I guess would be a good term for it, because I know the man was like that. I said, you put that away, because if you make any other hint, I'll be calling the police right now. And he did. Even in counseling sessions where your counselor doesn't reveal things, it's anything that a person would hurt themselves or hurt somebody else, you're not bound to that oath. Okay? So especially as brothers and sisters in Christ, if a brother or sister wants to confess a sin to you, that's one thing. You listen to them, you pray for them, pray with them, and you go on, and then you don't say anything about it, because really you shouldn't. But if they are going to do something, they're going to commit a sin, or a crime, then you've got to do something about it. So I want to make sure that we understand that, because it's difficult sometimes. People will put pressure on you to kind of keep things quiet that really you shouldn't. Well, let's listen to what Jesus says here. Matthew chapter 5, verse 33 through 37. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, and do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Now, because of this, there are people who won't take an oath and won't make a promise or anything of that period. And I guess that's okay if that's the way you want to handle it. But what Jesus is talking about is, don't make a promise that you intend to break. Don't make an oath to God or take a vow before God that you're not intending to keep, because that puts you in a pretty bad situation. Now, I don't want to break down this passage tonight. I want to look at a passage or some material from the Old Testament, and then a particular passage, particular event in the history of Israel that shows maybe why Jesus is talking like this to his disciples. And remember that the Sermon on the Mount is the transitional passage of the Bible. Jesus is telling the Jews that they have believed and lived according to a certain set of standards. Okay? Now, God expects us as Christians to live to an even higher standard, doesn't He? He desires for us to live according to the example set by Jesus Christ. But again, we have to know what we're talking about. So what was it about the Jews, the early disciples of Jesus who were coming out of Judaism into the church? What was it that they understood? And why is this very important to get them to, to impress upon them? If you make a promise, you make a promise to a person, you make a promise to God, as long, in my book, it's not immoral, it's not illegal, or unethical, it's not illegal, then you're bound to keep it. Under the law of Moses, God had instructed that oaths were binding. Any oath, okay? And I say any oath, but I think even there you can see some hints as you go through the whole teaching of it, where if it's an oath that's going to cause hurt to you as an individual, yes, you're going to keep that oath, even if it means that it's going to hurt you as an individual, and typically hurt your pocketbook or whatever. But if it's an oath that's going to hurt somebody else, then no, you're not bound to that. That's an oath that you shouldn't have made in the first place, and the best thing you can do is humble yourself before God and before that individual and say, I was wrong for making that oath. You all probably have heard of Jephthah's oath, where as he comes home from a battle, he tells the Lord, the first thing that greets me from my home, I'm going to offer as a sacrifice. And lo and behold, his daughter's first comes out to meet him. I don't think he offered her as a burnt offering, because that would be against God's law. But I think there was this deal where, she gets to go and enjoy life for a little bit, and then she leave home. That's my opinion. That's some scholarly stuff that goes on around there. But God says oaths are binding. Listen, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 12. You don't have to turn here if you don't want to. We're going to get through this one pretty quickly. You shall not swear by my name falsely and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. So you make a vow before God, you keep it. Don't make a vow or boldly make a promise that you're not going to keep. Deuteronomy 23:23. That doesn't sound right. Deuteronomy 23:23. Well, what I have here is, you shall be careful to do what has passed your lips, for you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your words. Is that what that said? What was I thinking of?
23:23.
Yeah, there's another passage. Is it? The secret things belong to, maybe that's 25:23. The secret things belong to. Anyway, it just caught me. Okay. Anyway, the history of the Israelites shows most to be oath breakers. Most of the Israelites were oath breakers, because remember, they took an oath about the covenant that said, I'm going to keep this covenant. We swear to God, we will obey the covenant. That law of Moses covenant, the old covenant. And of course we know that they didn't. But we can go to the book of Judges to see an example of how the Israelites tried to manipulate their oaths. And from that, we're going to discover how God expects us to abide in His covenant. Okay? Don't make a rash vow. Don't make a vow you don't intend to keep. And then once you make a vow that you end up seeing as being something foolish, be wise enough to get out of it in the proper way. Okay, Judges chapter 19. Started this is the Levite and his concubine. Judges 19, 1 through 3. In those days when there was no king in Israel. Remember what happened when there was no king in Israel? Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now that can be taken one of two ways. That can be, nobody really lived by the precepts of God, and we see that a lot. But also, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. There was nobody really above them to say, hey, you've got to do it this way. Each one had to learn. And I think we have kind of that today within the church, that it's incumbent upon each of us to know and understand what God expects of us, and to go out and do it. Well, we shouldn't say, oh, this is because my preacher says this, or this is what my church law says, and, you know, things of that nature. You know, understand God's will. So, at this time, a certain Levite was sojourning in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, who took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. And his concubine was unfaithful to him. How was she unfaithful? She went away from him to her father's house in Bethlehem, Judah, and was there some 4 months. In other words, she just left. Picked up and left. Then her husband, notice it called her husband, even though she's a concubine, she's more of a slave than she is a wife. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her. Maybe the reason she left was he hadn't been speaking kindly to her in the first place, and bring her back. He had with him his servant and a couple of donkeys, and she brought him into her father's house. Okay, he arrives there, and she goes out, she meets him, takes him into her father's house. And when the girl's father saw him, he came with joy to meet him. Yeah, well, you know, maybe he understands, you know, there was a contract of some sort made. She needs to go back where she belongs. Okay? And drop on down to verse 22. Verse 22 through 30. As they were making their hearts merry. Okay, now, I'll fill in between here. They finally leave her father's house and they head back to the hill country of Ephraim. And to do that, they have to pass through Benjamin. Remember, I'll give you kind of a map here, and from your west to east, Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim's kind of up on top. All right, but they're going to go through Benjamin and through a town called Jabesh Gilead. Or no, I'm sorry, not Jabesh Gilead. That's later. But they're going to go through a little town. So they get to a town, and somebody meets them, gets them to go into their house. Kind of like the Lot situation. You know, hey, Lot gets the two angels, gets them into his house. As they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, worthless fellows, surrounded the house, beating on the door. And they said to the old man, the master of the house, bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him. Of course, that's carnally. And the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, no, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Now, see, this isn't Sodom and Gomorrah. This is in the middle of Benjamin, in a town of the Israelites. Let me bring them, behold, here are my virgin daughter and his, at this man's concubine. Let me bring them out now. Violate them, and do with them what seems good to you, but against the man do not do this outrageous thing. Why? Why would that, it seems like, well, the degradation of women. Well, maybe to a degree, but it's also, there are some sins that are called sins. Homosexuality is called an abomination by God. It takes an even higher, it's a higher classification of hate, abhorrence in the sight of God. Where was I at here? So the man seized his concubine and made her go out to them, and they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. And as morning appeared, the woman came and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was, until it was light. And her master rose up in the morning when he opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way. Behold, there was his concubine lying at the door of the house, and with her hands on the threshold. Verse 28, he said to her, get up, let us be going. Now you know, again, why she probably ran away in the first place. The type of individual he was. But there was no answer. Then he put her on the donkey, and the man rose up and went away to his home. And when he entered his house, he took a knife, and taking hold of his concubine, he divided her limb by limb into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And all who saw it said, such a thing is never, the cutting up of the woman and sending those pieces to the tribes. Such a thing has never happened or been seen from the day that the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak. See, this is a terrible thing that happened. And again, it's not some group outside of Israel. It's the Israelites itself that had done this. And though I don't think there's anybody here with clean hands, but yet we can see what is happening. But let's go Judges chapter 20. The children of Israel gathered together to figure out what's going. They do it at Mizpah. Then all the people of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, the land of Gilead. Gilead was on the eastern side of the Jordan River, what's called the Transjordan. Remember, there were 2.5 tribes, Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh that didn't want to go into the promised land. They wanted the land on the side of the Jordan River. They were the first ones to be overrun, the last ones to be restored anytime there were problems, and they were the first basically to kind of give up, other than this group in Benjamin. And the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. And what they did, they sent this out, the word went out. Representatives from every town, every tribe, every town, here we've got a problem, let's get this taken care of. And the chiefs of all the people, all the tribes of Israel presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 men on foot that drew the sword. Now the people of Benjamin heard that the people of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. And the people of Israel said, tell us, how did this evil happen? You know, how did this happen that we got this, one got maybe a foot, and one maybe a shin bone, and one a thigh, you know, whatever. What caused this? And the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, and he tells the story, I came up to Gibeah, was the name of the town that belongs to Benjamin. He tells the story, tells what he did, and the abomination, if you go down to the end of verse 6, for they have committed abomination and outrage in Israel. Verse 7, behold, you people of Israel, all of you, give your advice and counsel here. And all the people arose as one man, saying, none of us will go to his tent, and none of us will return to his house. But now this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. So, you know, they were going to choose an army out of these 400,000 men, and they were going to go up to Gibeah, and they were going to destroy it. In other words, they made an oath before God that they were going to avenge this abomination. They were going to take care of this problem. So as the story unfolds, you know, they gather, they get their army together, but their first action, which is correct, is to ask the Benjamites, hand them over for punishment. Okay? In other words, you know that you got the different tribes, you got the 12 tribes, and this happened in Benjamin, and they're kind of like their own little autonomous group, and they tell them, hey, this has happened, it happened to Gibeah in your territory, you hand those men, that city, over for punishment. And Benjamin says, no, they may be terrible sinners, but they're our terrible sinners, and we're going to keep you. You just don't say anything to them. You just leave them be. So they refused. And they protected them from justice, but they were protecting them in their sin. They weren't trying to get them to change or even have justice for what had happened. So the rest of the tribes took an oath, and a second oath then, not to allow their daughters to marry a Benjaminite or a Benjamite, and then they joined to destroy the Gibeonites. But now they're just not going to fight the Gibeonites. They're going to have to fight the whole tribe of Benjamin in order to do this. So you see how sin, when it was not approached in the right way, now causes a big problem within Israel as a whole. Should the Benjamites have handed those men over, or at least punished them? Probably should have done it themselves, and things wouldn't have been so bad, because it gets worse and worse as we go on through the story. All right, the battle which followed shows us the great difficulty involved in this loose confederation. Yeah, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes, and they made these oaths. We're going to destroy that city. Now, okay, because Benjamin won't help, won't do what's right, we're not going to let any of our women marry those people into that tribe. So, through difficult circumstances, the Israelites defeated the Benjamites and the men of Gibeah, but they destroyed just about everybody. And Judges chapter 20, starting with verse 46, so all that fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 men who drew the sword, all of them men of valor. These were good men. These were good fighting men, and Israel needed them, but because they wouldn't do the right thing to punish Gibeah, they died in battle. But 600 men, verse 47, turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and remained at the rock of Rimmon 4 months. Everybody else in Benjamin is wiped out, but 600 men. Verse 48, and the men of Israel turned back against the people of Benjamin and struck them with the edge of the sword, the city, men, beasts, and all that they found, and all the towns that they found they set on fire. That whole tribe of Benjamin. Think about that. And now only 600 are left of that tribe. Now, Judges chapter 21. See, we're going through it pretty quick. This is where the Israelites really get into difficulty with the oaths in that they have made. An oath, we're going to destroy that city. Benjamin, we're going to give justice. If it means destroying the city, Benjamin, hand them over. No, they won't do it. Okay, we're not going to let anybody marry the tribe of Benjamin. They go to take the city, and the Benjamites rise up. They're going to defend them. They kill them, just about all of them. Verse 1, chapter 21, reading down through verse 7. Now the men of Israel had sworn at Mizpah, no one of us shall give his daughter in marriage to Benjamin. And the people came to Bethel, another one of their, what you'd call one of their holy cities, and sat there until evening before God. And they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly. It's a hard thing when you have to correct a brother or sister in Christ, isn't it? It's a very tough thing to do, and it was for them also. And they had to do it because that's what God's will says. And so here they are. When it's over, they reflect on it, and they're sad. And they said, O Lord, the God of Israel, why has this happened in Israel, that today there should be one tribe lacking in Israel? And the next day the people rose early and built there an altar and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And the people of Israel said, which of all the tribes of Israel did not come up in the assembly of the Lord? For they had taken a great oath concerning him who did not come up to the Lord in Mizpah. This is another one that we're just learning about, right? Saying, he shall surely be put to death. In other words, if there were towns, people who did not come to help with this justice, they would be slaughtered. They took an oath to that. He shall surely be put to death. Verse 6, and the people of Israel had compassion for Benjamin their brother, and said, one tribe is cut off from Israel this day. What shall we do for wives for those who are left, those 600 men at the rock of Rimmon? Since we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them any of our daughters for wives. Now you've got conflicting things going on here, isn't it? We want to be merciful to these 600 men, because it's not right. It's 12 tribes of Israel. What do? We said we won't give our daughters, for wives to any of them in Benjamin. Verse 8, and they said, what one is there of the tribes of Israel that did not come up to the Lord to Mizpah? In other words, that initial gathering where they were making this decision. Anybody that doesn't come up, we're going to slaughter them. And behold, no one had come up from the camp to the camp from Jabesh Gilead. Have you heard of Jabesh Gilead before? Remember that prayer that was really famous here, about 3-4 years ago? Jabesh Gilead, and the prayer of Jabesh or whatever. That's kind of in that area, I believe. But they didn't come up to that assembly. They just ignored it. For when the people were mustered, behold, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent 12,000 of their bravest men there, and commanded them, go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, also the women and the little ones. This is what you shall do. Every male and every woman that has lain with a male you shall devote to destruction. And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man by lying with him, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. In other words, here's how they remedied that oath, that rash oath that they made. They went over here and slaughtered this town because that was another oath that they had made, but they kept 400 young virgin women, brought them back to give them as wives to these, and that way they say, we're not giving any of our daughters, and they didn't show up at the meeting, so they didn't take the oath. Now we can let them go. The whole congregation sent word to the people of Benjamin who were at the rock at Rimmon, and proclaimed peace to them. And Benjamin returned at that time, and they gave them the women whom they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh Gilead, but they were not enough for them. Yeah, there were 600 men, now you got 400 women, you're going to have another war, right?
Amen.
Then the elders of the congregation said, what shall we do for the wives of those who are left, since the women are destroyed out of Benjamin? And they said, there must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe not be blotted out from Israel. Yet we cannot give them wives from our daughters. Why? Because they made an oath that they couldn't do it, right? So they said, behold, there is the yearly feast of the Lord at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Lebonah. And they commanded the people of Benjamin, saying, basically these other 200 men, go and lie in ambush in the vineyards, and watch. If the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyards and snatch each man his wife from the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. And when the fathers or their brothers come to complain to us, we will say to them, grant them graciously to us, because we did not take for each man of them his wife in battle, neither did you give them to them, which would break the oath, right? Else you would now be guilty. In other words, you're not giving them to them, they're taking them. And you're not going to say anything about it. Wow. Verse 23. And the people of Benjamin did so, and took their wives according to their number from the dancers whom they carried off. Then they went and returned to their inheritance. But now here's a good part, okay? All that's going on, but here's some good things. They rebuilt the towns and lived in them. And the people of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and family. And they went out from there, every man to his inheritance. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. And you see how messed up it was because of it. All right? So, another good thing that comes out of it. This is happening in that 400-year period of the judges, right? after the 400 years, after Samuel, the last of the judges, Saul is appointed as the first king, and that's down about 1100 BC by the current dating system that we use. And yeah, about 1100, about 1060 or somewhere in there, David becomes king, and he is for 40 years. Somewhere about 1000, Solomon takes over. And remember, the kingdom is taken and torn in two, the south and the north, at the time of Rehoboam, Solomon's son. I've talked about that before. And because of that, 11 tribes go to the north with Israel and leaves Judah alone with King Rehoboam. And at that point, Benjamin goes with them. But here's the thing, after a little while, Benjamin comes back. And it's Judah and Benjamin has learned the lessons in a hard way, and they actually are more faithful to God than what those other 10 tribes are. That's why we talk about the 10 lost tribes. Benjamin has kind of picked it up, and they're coming back. They're there, and in fact, if you go to Genesis, I think it's chapter 49, where you have the Jacob blessing his sons, Benjamin is called the right hand of Judah. And you see the prophecy coming out. But look at all that had to happen in there. Look at all the destruction that was done because sin was in the camp and sin wasn't dealt with in a proper way to begin with. It just gets into this whole terrible deal. So most of us have made a verbal or mental promise to God at some time or another, or a promise to somebody. It may have been in a hospital bed during an illness. It may have been at the scene of an accident, or it could have been some time when you felt so alone that you could not stand it. Perhaps as a Christian, it was something you said on the day that you were born again. And all these things, men were listening, but more importantly, God was listening. And he has made an account of all the promises that you and I have made to him, and the vows we've taken to him, and the oaths that we've taken to him. So, the question then becomes, are we fulfilling our vows, our oaths, our commitments to God? So there's no better opportunity to become a child of God, or return to God. If there's any problem, then immediately, what we say, today is the day of salvation. Now, I'm not putting this lesson out here because I think anybody needs, to respond. I think it's just a good lesson to show us, what happens that if we're not taking seriously these things and making sure that we're doing things in the right way, that we can easily get off, and then we can be pressured by vows that we make rashly into doing things that are immoral or illegal or unethical or illegal. So anyway, that's the lesson. If you have a need tonight, let your request be made known as we stand and sing the invitation song.